Do you like the color orange? How about garage or yard sales? Are you into partying? If you said yes to any one of those three things, you should go to the Netherlands on Koningsdag or King's Day, April 27th. Koningsdag or King's Day is the celebration of our current king, Koning Willem-Alexander's birthday. The streets will be filled with people dressed in orange from head to toe. And on the sides of the streets will be families trying to sell their treasures to other people, like it is one big flea market. And every bar will serve your favorite drinks colored orange, and the parties are second to none. Hi, I'm Tuan and welcome to my kitchen. If you're new to this channel, I focus on cooking food from my home country, the Netherlands, and some of its former colonies, such as Indonesia. This Tuesday is April 27th, 2021, and that is King's Day. I always wear orange on King's Day, even though I've been living in the United States for over 25 years. And every year I make this, a very traditional King's Day pastry. It's called a tompoes. It is pastry cream in between two layers of puff pastry with a sweet glaze on top. And of course, there'll be plenty of orange in it. So in order to challenge myself, I put all the ingredients on the board here, with the exception of the puff pastry. And since they all look a lot alike, I have to figure out which one is which. So fun little game. Hopefully I don't mess up. First, you'll need 1 tablespoon of gelatin, 310 milliliters of milk divided in 225, 25, and 60. The zest of 1 orange, 35 grams of vanilla pudding powder or custard powder, a total of 75 grams of regular sugar divided in 35 and 40 grams, 15 grams of orange juice, 1 egg yolk, 350 milliliters of heavy whipping cream, and 100 grams of powdered sugar. You will also need some apricot jam or fruit spread, as this is called. We're going to use that actually on top of the puff pastry before we put the glaze on it. There are 3 more ingredients that you will need. All of these have to do with the glaze. The first 2 are a red and yellow food coloring. We use this to make that glaze nice and orange, because after all, we are celebrating the king with this pastry. And because I want it to taste like orange, we're adding just a little bit of orange flavor to it, because even though we're using orange juice, the powdered sugar just kind of takes over the flavor. So adding this just brightens it up and makes it really taste like orange. Now, the very first thing we have to do is dock the puff pastry. So I'm going to empty all of this off my board so I can do that. We'll then bake it because it has to be fully cooled before we assemble everything. I've already rolled out my puff pastry sheet to be approximately 40 centimeters, 16 inches, by 24 centimeters, 9.5 inches. The official size of a tompoes is 11 centimeters by 4 centimeters, and this allows for a little shrinkage. I've preheated my oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit in convection mode, which is what the instructions on the box for this brand of puff pastry said. You should follow the temperature guide on whatever brand of puff pastry you purchased. But before we do anything, we have to dock this puff pastry because we actually don't want it to rise up. So with a fork, or if you have one of those rollers, you want to poke holes all over the sheet. And you don't have to be too gentle with this, because you want to make sure that you break through all the layers. So it's important with puff pastry that you keep it cool and you don't let it get too warm so that the butter melts. Before I pop it in the oven, I'm going to put it in the fridge for probably 10 minutes. Next, what we'll be doing is putting 225 milliliters of milk, 40 grams of sugar, and the zest of 1 orange. We're going to stir it together and then bring it to a boil on the stove. I've taken the puff pastry out of the fridge, and now it's time to go put it in the oven. And I'm following the directions on the box, which is, in my case, 325 degrees Fahrenheit in convection mode for half an hour. However, for this, what you want to do is actually dry the dough out just a little bit. So after the half hour, what I'm going to do is change from convection to non-convection and lower the temperature to 275. And I'm going to leave it in there for another 10 minutes, and then I will take it out of the oven. While the milk is coming to a boil, I am going to mix the pudding powder, the milk, and the egg yolk. First, you add the milk to the pudding powder, and you are going to whisk it with the tiny little whisk until it is combined and no longer lumpy. Pudding powder consists of cornstarch, which will help thicken up. This one also has a vanilla added. If you're using custard powder, you may want to add a little bit of vanilla just for flavor, because typical custard powder has no flavor added to it. 1 egg yolk. And the egg yolk will just add to the richness of this pudding. This is all incorporated. There are no more lumps. So going back to the stove to see how the milk is doing. I love how the orange zest is coloring the milk. It turns a very nice shade of orange in here, which of course goes great with Koningsdag. Just stir it around and wait for it to hit a rolling boil. And there we go. Gonna turn off the flame, stir it around a little bit, and bring it back over here. First thing we have to do is temper this by adding some of the hot liquid to this while stirring it. And then once we've done that 3 times, we put it back in here and bring it back to the stove. Slowly add it, but keep stirring. And now it's time to add the second spoonful. We're just slowly bringing this mixture up to temperature, so we're kind of tricking the egg in not turning into scrambled eggs. All right, 1 more. So I have some great smells going on here. I have the vanilla from the pudding powder, I have the orange from the milk, and that combined just kind of makes me think of some cream of orange gelato we had in Rome when we were there. It smells absolutely delicious. Because I want to make sure that there are no pieces of cooked egg in here, I'm actually going to pour it through a strainer. You want to make sure that you are constantly whisking this as it is coming to a boil. It will become really apparent once it hits boiling temperature. And you can see as I tilt it that it is starting to get thicker and thicker. So we're going to wait until it makes a couple of bloops like that. You don't want to keep boiling it too long because then it will actually break. Just wait for a couple of those bubbles. There you go, that's it. I'm going to turn the flame off. We're going to pour it in a shallow dish. This is a pie dish that works really well for this. And we want it to come to room temperature. 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius, give or take, because if it gets too cold, we'll have problems mixing in the gelatin later. Pour it in here, and I'm going to use the spatula to get all the last good bits out of this pan. It smells so good. I like to spread it out so it's got a better chance of cooling off evenly. And then to prevent a skin from forming on it, we're going to cover it with plastic wrap and push the plastic wrap right onto the pudding mixture. So if you want to speed up the cooling down, you can put it in the fridge for a little bit of time to just get it to cool down faster if you're in a hurry. But if you have the time, you can just let it come to room temperature on its own. Now it's time to start blooming the gelatin. So take 60 milliliters of milk, room temperature, and add 1 tablespoon of gelatin in it. And you can actually just let this sit. What you'll see is that this will become almost a solid mass. The milk and the gelatin will become one blob, if you will. And before we use it, we're going to put it on a low flame and just heat it up to about 120 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. That will melt it, and then we will add it to the pastry cream. Now I'm going to make the whipped cream. So I'm taking 35 grams of sugar to 350 milliliters of heavy whipping cream. So it's a 10% sugar ratio. And we're now going to whip that to stiff peak. And we're going to start slowly so that I won't end up wearing the whipping cream on my apron. Of course, you get the best results whipping heavy cream with a bowl that is ice cold and beaters that are cold as well. So I've put these in the fridge for a while before using it. All right, and I think we're at stiff peaks. As a kid, I would want my mom to have as much whipped cream left on the beaters because I got to lick it off, but I'm an adult now, so I don't do that anymore. Right? Right. Gonna put this in the fridge. The puff pastry is out of the oven. It has cooled off. So now what I'm going to do is cut it into 2 strips. So first, I'm gonna measure, because, you know, ever the engineer. So it is about 24 centimeters on this side, 24 centimeters on that side. Ideally, they're 11 centimeters long, but 12 will do. I'm gonna make a little mark at the 12 right there. And then do the same thing over here. And now very carefully cut it. Don't put too much pressure on. Just use the sawing motion. And now we have 2 pieces. Clearly it isn't straight, so as you can see, this one is slightly larger, so I'm actually going to trim this off. Okay, so now we have 2 even pieces. I'm going to the stove to melt the gelatin, and then I will mix it through the pudding mixture. As it's been sitting here blooming, it has gotten kind of solid. When we heat this up, it is going to melt. The only thing you want to make sure of is that it does not get hotter than 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So you want to melt this until there are no more visible lumps of gelatin in here. And it goes pretty quickly. 125 degrees. So this is now at the perfect temperature. We have to act a little quickly now. We're going to take the cooled off pudding mixture and put it into a bowl. Make sure you get it all. First, whisk it until it's a little bit loose. Just like this. And now we're going to whisk in the gelatin. Time to get the whipped cream. So first thing I'm going to do is just take a small scoop, whisk it through there. And the rest we will fold through. So add all the whipped cream, fold it through, trying not to deflate the whipped cream too much. So always from the center, fold over, and I like to rotate the bowl as I do that. We need to put this in the fridge to set, and I like to do that actually in the bag that I'm going to use to pipe it onto the puff pastry so that I don't have to transfer it twice. So I use a zip top bag for that, but if you have a pastry bag, you can use that as well. And you will need all of this, so try to make sure you get everything in the bag. All right, I'm going to squeeze out as much of the air, but what I'm trying to do is leave the little corner here without any of the pastry cream in it, so that I can cut it off later and use it as the corner from which I squeeze it out. That's gonna go in the fridge for 5 to 10 minutes, let it set, and then we will start assembling. It's been 10 minutes, so let's get the pastry cream out of the fridge. But before we do that, take a look at your puff pastry. In my case, this one still puffed up a little bit over here, so I'm actually gonna make this the bottom and the flatter version is gonna be the top. But I'm gonna invert it because the side that was on the baking sheet when it was in the oven, of course, is perfectly flat, and this is what's going to get a glaze on it. This is my bottom, and that is my top. We're going to turn the zip top back into a piping bag by cutting off the corner. And we don't need any of those fancy edges because we're just going to pipe it right here on the puff pastry. Go as close to the edge as you can. Just fill in the gaps. Made a little bit of a mess, but we'll clean that up. Push it down, and then with an offset spatula, so we're gonna scrape off the excess. Before we can put a glaze on top, we actually wanna make a little bit of a barrier by melting some apricot jam and spreading it over here. So I'm going to take 2 tablespoons of apricot jam, put it in a little pan, and then on the stove, I'm just going to heat it up until it is nice and soft, and then with my pastry brush, I'm going to put it all over there. The apricot jelly or jam is melted, and we are now going to cover the top layer with it. And you want to make sure you get the entire top. Just enough to put a little bit of a barrier between the puff pastry and the sugar glaze that we're going to make. All of it is coated, and we're now going to clean this pan and make the sugar glaze in it. We're going to take our 15 grams of orange juice, 100 grams of powdered sugar, half a teaspoon of the orange flavor. Now that I have mixed it all through, the orange juice really didn't make it orange, which is why we want that food coloring. And I'm not going to add it until I have it on the stove on a low flame so I can melt this and make it a little bit thinner. Then we'll add a couple of drops each of red and yellow and see if we like the color orange. Over a low flame, it is getting nice and thin already. We're going to add 1, 2, 3 drops of red, 1, 2, and 3 of yellow. And we're going to mix that through. I may have to add some more yellow. Yep, a little bit more yellow. There you go. And that looks more orange already. Ah, look at that. That's great. Not quite the color of my shirt. We have to work a little fast because you want to make sure that this is nice and liquidy. So you can just pour it on the tompouce. Just going to pour it on here, and with the spatula, spread it. Okay, so here we are. The glaze is not the prettiest I've ever seen. This is definitely not what you find in a pastry shop. But I like the color orange, and I know it will taste just fine. So we're going to cut it. Traditionally, tompouces are 4 centimeters, and very gently and very gingerly cut through this. Time to taste. When I was a kid, what I would do is I would actually remove the top layer with the sugar glaze and save that for last, because that was my favorite part. Now as an adult, I'm way more civilized, and we'll eat it with a knife and fork. I'm gonna cut a little piece. I have to do this with my hands. No other way of picking this up. Eet smakelijk. Delicious. The rich cream in between the 2 flaky layers of puff pastry has just a hint of vanilla from the pudding powder and some notes of orange from the zest that is through there. Then you get that sweet orangey flavor from the sugar glaze that has the added orange flavor, and all combined, it is absolutely great. When you go to a bakery, you'll be asked if you want whipped cream on top, and if you say yes, you will get a bead of whipped cream. Not like that. Imagine there's still a piece of tompouce there. Traditional version that you find at bakeries or grocery stores has a pink glaze. That is made with just water, powdered sugar, and just a few drops of beet juice. The original is made with rum and powdered sugar, no coloring whatsoever. It will just be this white glaze on top that has just a hint of rum flavor. So those are the different versions, but on Koningsdag we only eat the orange one. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please click the like and subscribe button, share it with your friends, and if you remember going to Koningsdag and eating an orange tompouce, please leave a comment below, or if you have any questions about the recipe. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one. Mix it, mix it, mix it. Yep, we're gonna add some more yellow. Can't use that video. Now what?